There's a ton of chat in the industry at the moment about managed SIEM. What's the future of it and how does it fit in with all of these new emerging technologies like XDR, EDR, MDR? So I'm here with Oliver Pinson-Roxburgh, CEO of Defense.com, to try and make sense of it all. Mentioned buzzwords at the top there. There's tons of them out there. I think businesses are kind of at that point now where they're not sure, do they even need this SIEM thing?
In cybersecurity in general, we've always had this thing in the industry where we all laugh about it because it is acronym hell. There's just so much. And if you're new to an industry, let alone a consumer of a security product, going into it, trying to understand what these acronyms are is hard work. I think there's a general issue in the industry where we assume that people understand what those acronyms mean and what they do. When XDR came out, it was like, what's really extended detection and response? How is it extended? And everyone has their own concepts of what makes it extended, which also makes it very difficult for a consumer to say, why is this one different to this one? They all say they're XDR, but then you read between the lines and some of them have training included in them and some of them have this other kind of funky feature that the other one doesn't have. As a consumer, how do I decide what's right for me? And there's a certain element of where does it fit in what I've already got? Like I've already got antivirus products. Then you start to think, okay, what do I actually need now? And I think specifically talking about SIEM, the question then becomes, do I even need that thing? I've spent a lot of money on it, time, energy, and I've got people using it, working with it day in, day out. Do I even need this now? And there is this really funny meme, well, funny for us nerds in the industry meme. Yeah, it kind of says something like, realizing that XDR doesn't actually do what SIEM does, need to go off and buy SIEM again, sort of thing. And you kind of definitely see that in security in general. There's a lot of feeling from the consumer that it's like, okay, I've bought this thing now. I don't need to worry about all this other stuff that I've got. I can just ditch it. And then that kind of realization coming back of like, but now I'm missing this feature. How do I get that bit out of it? Oh, what? It doesn't do that anymore? I think the biggest concern is going to come around things like compliance, because compliance mandates specific technologies, rightly or wrongly. And I guess touching on that subject really quickly, most compliance standards have an intent, and the intent is to make you more secure. So a lot of people go through it and just checkbox exercise the compliance standards, right? And they say, you know, what do you do around log management? Oh, I have this SIEM product. Yes, I have one. And then that's good enough. But that's not what the intent is. The idea of having a SIEM product in place to kind of address the problem specifically is that you've got log data there for a long period of time that's accessible should something happen that you can't explain using your other technologies.
Because there's no real hard definition of what some of those acronyms mean, like XDR, it's really easy for buyers to get lost and maybe almost forget some of the things like you just mentioned, where the log data bit is so crucial, and a typical XDR product won't store your log data for long periods of time. And obviously you need that for certain compliance standards.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing as well, is that you're not a security professional, quite rightly. You know, you're a business that's been told you need something, or you're genuinely concerned about a particular threat. Suddenly there's this kind of knight in shining armor that comes in, XDR, and says, we're going to solve these problems for you. And the company goes, great, I need this thing. And I don't need all the other stuff I've got. Maybe because this is the new shiny thing, but not necessarily aware of like what those limitations could be and what it is that you're buying it for and how you solve that problem. And that's where the confusion starts to arise.
Ultimately, businesses want to focus on what's important to them, which is running their business.
Yeah.
Obviously, what's important to us is the security aspects, making sure they can continue to run their business. And I think naturally, as a buyer or just as a person, you're going to levitate towards what's simplest.
Yeah.
And I think that's where XDR and other technologies really do a good job, I guess, because they create the perception of simplicity, whereas there maybe isn't that perception around managed SIEM that it's simple.
No.
And do you think that's why a lot of businesses maybe aren't prioritizing managed SIEM as a part of their security strategy?
The drivers are different, aren't they, I think, from a SIEM product? Yes, okay, back in the day, it was always about this thing is very good at bringing all these things together, normalizing the data and making it easier for you to escalate worrying things. But ultimately, a lot of what it was there to do was to meet compliance obligation that says, and again, coming back to the intent of that, you should store the data for a long time. What is that for? That's the retrospective look back. We didn't detect something fishy is happening. We need to go back and find out what happened at that time in that time window when we suspect something changed in our environment. Some antivirus products, XDR products, don't store log data for any longer than 7 days. So you've got a 7-day window of where it might have captured some additional stuff. It hasn't detected or responded to anything, but it may have captured something that could be useful in finding something it hasn't been able to detect. And you've lost it after 7 days. And that's where SIEMs come into their own, because they can look for the anomalies in those things. And that's where analysts are very good, because they can look at that data and say, well, last week when I was looking at this log data, it didn't look like this. Something's looking different here. And that's why compliance and standards and stuff like that also help, because if you have a pattern of behavior of what normal looks like and what your compliance and your policies say you should do, like naming your admins a certain way or naming your machines a certain way, that allows you to spot those anomalies really easily. And again, detection products like XDRs and EDRs and AVs still rely on being able to detect and respond to those things. So it's more that kind of idea of when it's not quite clear what you detect it, you could at least have an attempt at looking at it. And of course, the worst thing, of course, with all this, with log data, is generally speaking, you're preparing yourself for the worst. You have been breached. You don't know why, because you've made all these cybersecurity investments. Now you've got to work out what missed it. And that's where defense in depth and this kind of strategy of having more than one security product is really important. And that's why you shouldn't really ditch any of the products unless they really truly overlap with each other.